We're going to give you an exclusive first look now at a new hard-hitting campaign against smoking. It shows what kids really think about cigarette packs and why removing branding is so important. Check it out.
Makes me feel happy.
And it reminds me of the beach from the sand there.
This one's called Freedom.
Oh, it reminds me of drinking this medicine that's that colour.
Yeah. They remind me of lollies.
Because I always see these in the dairy.
Because some lollies have the liquidy stuff that look exactly like this. And yeah, it reminds me of lollies.
I picked this one because it has bamboo and I like bamboo.
Ooh, I like this word.
It says that it's New Zealand's #1.
Well, it says the word freedom, so it's like he's free to smoke and stuff.
It looks like you could just slide it out and eat it.
Like, if there was no picture, you would probably think that it looks like the extra chewing gum.
Looks pretty.
Well, with me now is Professor Norman Sharp from the Heart Foundation. Professor, what did you make of those ads? Were you surprised by the way the kids reacted there?
I'm not surprised. I mean, children are highly impressed with glossy brands and images, and this is a major factor when they see cigarette packets, considering whether they'll smoke or not.
So this is the whole point of this campaign, isn't it? To try and get kids before they start smoking, and obviously they are attracted by these packets. Why did you decide to sort of jump on board with this? Why did the Heart Foundation decide to do this?
Well, we're set on track for Smokefree Aotearoa 2025, and there are two parts to that. One is tobacco control, and the other is better support for smokers to quit. This is the next step along the way for tobacco control. So if this is one more reason that children are less likely to smoke, then we must support it. We want to show to the public how children are greatly impressed by glossy brands and images, and so we need to remove those glossy brands.
So this new ad that's about to come out, is this no coincidence then? I mean, we've just had this legislation from Australia. Obviously a lot of people are getting behind it and wanting that to happen here in New Zealand. Is this timing all around that decision? Oh,
this is part of a campaign, and there's a public submission process and train through until October, and you can go on the web www.plainpacks.org.nz, plainpacks.org.nz, and every parent and grandparent should show an interest in this, in the interest of their children and grandchildren. This is all about our children, and again, it's one less reason that they'll be influenced to smoke.
I guess you could argue that if you hid the cigarette packet, say at a dairy, then the kids wouldn't see them. What's your sort of view here? Are you kind of thinking, well, if the parents have them at home, then kids are going to get access to them anyway?
It's not enough. We've got to take them out of sight and make them plain, and also combine those plain packaging. That plain packaging with the health images, the health warnings, which are also effective. There's overwhelming support for this from the public, but the public do need to step up and show that support through their submissions, and children themselves are overwhelmingly in support of this plain packaging. They're very smart, our children. There's been a very large survey of this, and the children, 80% of them favour plain packaging.
Fantastic. Well, Professor Norman Sharp, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Interesting, 80%. We'll have to get some feedback on that. 80% of children prefer the plain packaging. Well, they get attracted by it. Some of them saying how pretty it was. Continuing our coverage on plain packaging for cigarettes and whether New Zealand should follow Australia's lead to have branding stripped off the shelves. Earlier, the Heart Foundation told us why they're weighing into this debate. Take a look.
We're set on track for Smokefree Aotearoa 2025, and there are two parts to that. One is tobacco control, and the other is better support for smokers to quit. And we want to show to the public how children are greatly impressed by glossy brands and images, and so we need to remove those glossy brands.
Well, joining me now is industry commentator Carrick Graham, who used to work in public relations for British American Tobacco. Thank you for joining us, Carrick.
My pleasure.
How do you think your company would have responded to this legislation being passed in Australia?
Well, it was a court case. It hasn't been gone ahead just yet, so let's not jump ahead. Look, I think the company's expected the decision out of the Australian High Court, but Australia, and people have got to remember that there are more cases pending, as well as WTO complaints. So there's a long way to go before this thing is set in stone.
So what you're saying is basically these companies will fight to the hilt, will they, to make sure this doesn't go ahead?
Well, absolutely, and so they should. Because here you have, despite all the issues around, the health issues around tobacco, you have a company that has, and many companies that have invested a lot of time and effort into their brands and into their intellectual property. And here you have a government that comes along and says, well, we don't like it. So we're going to stop you from having any colours, any of your fonts, any of your imagery, and any of your intellectual property, and we're just going to have plain old packs. And I have to say, I think other companies should be very worried by this. We've seen complaints, or we've seen ideas being floated by the Minister Turia. She doesn't like fast food. She would rather ban gambling as well. We've seen issues in Australia where they are thinking about taking away the imagery of some of the pokie machines in Australia. We've seen recently ideas floating around from public health groups that they don't like infant formula, so they want plain packaging on infant formula. You know, this thing's not going to stop here just with tobacco.
Do these companies have a moral responsibility to, you know, be responsible in the way they market and have the packaging of their products?
Well, I think they are very responsible companies. I mean, it is a highly regulated industry, and these companies deal in a product that has risk, yes, but it's still a legal product, so it's there. That's life. That, you know, people, unless the government says, look, we're going to ban it, which is their choice, at the same time they take over $1 billion in tax from the product each year. And they give about $150 million over the last 3 years to tobacco control groups. So the item you saw this morning with these kids with the packs is all well and true. But you've got to be over 18 to buy it. And if the government was serious about tobacco control, I think they should actually work with the industry rather than just ostracise them.
So you're surprised then what's happening in Australia, and what do you think the chances of that happening here are?
Well, there's a consultation process being underway now, and anyone can submit on it. I've seen the consultation paper. I think there are some issues around potential bias in it, but that's just my personal view. I think if it does go ahead, and Tariana seems to think this is a great idea, I do think other companies should be very worried.
Well, Carrick Graham, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thanks, and nice to have that perspective as well, someone that's been in the industry. Thanks you.
And while we're on the topic, here are some of your thoughts at home on this issue. You've written in, you've told us. Pete Chapman emailed in to say, let's extend plain packaging to chips, biscuits, all forms of confectionery and sugary beverages, and reduce obesity while we're at it. I have no issue with plain cigarette packs as a smoker, but obesity is a rife killer in New Zealand too.
And that certainly goes with what Carrick was just saying. And Trish Higginson Facebooked us saying she is in total support of plain packaging and thinks the packs are just another way to market, particularly to young children, unethical.
We've had lots of feedback on this, so we're just going to keep rolling with it. Melissa, you've got some?
Yeah, I do. I've got one here from a non-smoker. She feels that the Australian government's gone too far. She said it undermines the principles of intellectual property, and she, as Carrick was just mentioning, says that the government already has such a strong hand in the industry with regards to the tax take. People are well aware of the dangers and should. Somebody also texted in saying plain packaging, that's full of it. Kids start smoking in their teens, not when they're 6. There's a different level of attraction other than the colour of packs. One here from Dave Natai saying they should butt out of people's personal choice. Using kids is wrong. Money they are spending on all of this should be spent on drink driving. That kills whole families. And that was something, Melissa, that you were going to tell us about with cigarettes. You had a little article you saw.
I was just reading something in an opinion piece in Australia that was just talking about, you know, how far are we going to go with this, and if the government really wants to save lives, then maybe they should be taking a stronger look at alcohol, saying that you never see on a TV report at night somebody has the person ploughed into a pole after chain smoking cigarettes or a packet, and I think it was just taking it a step further to say how far are we going to start to go to cut down on that alcohol intake or things like that. And I guess what some people are saying is true. We do know the dangers of smoking. We've been well aware of it for some time. So it is an interesting issue.
And is it any different to the whole fatty food debate? Will we see plain packaging on things like burgers and soft drink in the future? I understand the need to want to do something about it. I'm unsure that legislation is always the answer, and it seems to be our fallback. And I think that we go to it far too many times. And I think that as a society, we can actually tackle some of these problems ourselves. Well, that's me, optimistic me. One News Update is brought to you by ANZ, proud sponsor of the New Zealand Olympic team.
A cigarette company's expansion in a Wellington suburb is getting up the nose of some Petone residents. The sickly smell of tobacco wafting from the plant's production line is causing complaints. Sarah Bradley explains.
The sign says no smoking, but there's still the smell of tobacco in the air.
There is a considerable difference to what there used to be, but obviously they're burning a lot more, they've got more business to do.
Some residents say it's the first time they've caught a whiff of the factory.
And I'm guessing that it's connected to the increase in capacity just because I've just started noticing it.
The Greater Wellington Regional Council has received several complaints.
We understand the odour to be quite a sweet, kind of sickly type odour, and generally speaking the complaints are around the intensity and the duration of that odour.
One resulted in an infringement and abatement notice being issued to Imperial Tobacco.
One of our enforcement officers has found the odour to be offensive and objectionable.
The factory is processing more tobacco and says the smell is a result of steam from blending tobacco leaf and water, and not everyone dislikes it.
I don't find the smell too offensive myself because it's not all the time, but I don't really support or like the tobacco industry, so especially with little ones.
As a result of the recent infringement notice, Imperial Tobacco says it's doing further upgrade work on the factory to reduce the odour in this neighbourhood as much as possible. A recent overseas study found air emissions from cigarette factories to contain some harmful compounds. No such studies have been conducted in New Zealand. However, Imperial Tobacco says it meets local environmental standards. Sarah Bradley, One News.
This One News update is brought to you by ANZ, proud sponsor of the New Zealand Olympic team.
For weeks now, we've been discussing plain packaging on cigarettes, and we've had plenty of feedback from you wondering why alcohol isn't under the same scrutiny. So to answer that question and discuss whether the move to plain packs will open the floodgates to other products, I'm joined by Senior Marketing Lecturer from the University of Auckland, Dr. Bodo Lang. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you tell us what is the difference for you between alcohol and cigarettes?
Yeah, sure. I think the key difference between the two product categories is that tobacco is the only product that kills its user when used as intended. We know that about 50% of smokers die of smoking-related causes, and that's not the same for alcohol. So that's the key difference between the two products.
So, because alcohol can be used safely, it therefore shouldn't come under the same sort of blanket rules, such as, you know, hiding them from the public view or plain packaging, in your opinion?
I think there's, I think the two are not the same. I think there's certainly a lot of similarities between the two, but I think alcohol and tobacco are not the same. Some similarities are, that they both incur a huge health and financial cost to the individual and also to society. They're both consumed in public, which is very, very important for packaging and for branding purposes. And we also know that in both categories that branding is a key driver of purchase. So if I have prominent packaging on a bottle or on a pack of cigarettes, that is a key driver of purchase.
So say plain packaging is the extreme end of getting rid of all marketing and branding. Is there, do you think, a step before that could be considered for alcohol? Because we know, even looking at 1/5 of Australian children are victims of alcohol-related harm. Statistics like that are ugly.
They're very ugly indeed. I think you're right, and I think there are other options before we would, jump to plain packaging. So if the issue is that we want to maybe curb certain behaviours that are alcohol-related, then I think we've got a whole other repertoire of things that we can do. So, for example, we can disincentivize certain types of behaviours that are alcohol-related. So, just to give you an example, if somebody's found over a certain alcohol limit in public, maybe in Queen Street on a Friday night, there could be something that we can do with these people. So, we can curb this.
What role does marketing and branding have in that? Do they have a role to play to reduce binge drinking in New Zealand, which is really the issue?
I think, obviously branding is a key driver of purchase. And the more...
How are we driven by branding, do you think?
So I think what branding does is it creates very strong, memorable, positive associations between the brand and the user. And so if you're seen to be drinking a certain type of brand, of beer, for example, then you might be seen as more masculine, more cosmopolitan, a more independent type of person. And so if you withdraw that branding, what happens is that that association is lessened, and the drive to buy that particular brand is also lessened. And so that can probably curb consumption of that particular brand.
Do you think the marketing and branding of alcohol will come under pressure?
I think it will come under pressure, because I think if you look now back at tobacco advertising and how it was done 10, 15, 20 years ago, you look at it now and you think, wow, how did we get away with this? And, you know, alcohol may be in the same boat, that in 10, 15 years, we look at what we do now and we think, wow, that's quite inappropriate. So, but I think there are certain other steps that can be taken before that.
All right, Dr. Bodo Lang, Senior Lecturer at the Department of Marketing, University of Auckland. Thank you.
Thank you.